Hello and welcome everybody. Today we're introducing probably the most useful tutorial we've had so far, which is being introduced to the VR template 2022.3.9. Each year I recreate this starting template using the 3D rendering engine, so we're not using URP or HDRP, we're using the standard 3D one, which means the assets will work quite nicely. And every year I leave it to the last possible second to create the starting template because XR tools, the extended reality tools that Unity produce, are updated so rapidly. I want to give you all the best opportunity and the best advantage to make good use of that. So the provided sample scene that you get out of this package, which will be available on Moodle and also on the X drive, and it'll be in the computing and D-Day folder. But what you'll get in this package, three simple objects: a light, a plane which represents the floor, and a table which is nothing more than a series of cubes. And then the object where the magic happens, the XR interaction setup object, which can be found in the asset space, under samples, under here, under 2.5.1, under the starter assets and under prefabs. This is the object that I've dragged in, the XR interaction setup. So if ever you realise you make a mistake with it, you can just replace it and have another one. But the XR interaction setup does everything that you need it to do, including movement, rotation, grabbing objects, teleportation, climbing, different methods of interactivity. It includes it all out of the box, and it's an exceptionally powerful piece of kit. Important to remember, whenever you are using this toolkit, whenever you got this package open, it's designed to work in virtual reality. So if you're on a headset station, make sure that you've got Oculus running on the machine. So you've opened up Oculus, you've logged in using your credentials, because remember you have to have a Facebook account or similar. You go to the settings tab at the bottom, you go to general, you allow unknown sources because your project will be an unknown source, and you also make sure that OpenXR runtime is set. Otherwise, if you haven't pressed that button, it should be greyed out, it will not operate and won't run. Usually what you'll get instead is what appears like a flat screen. It looks like you're playing a 3D game in a VR headset, and it's not what we want. So when all that is set, when you press the play button, it should come through to the VR headset as long as that's all been set up. Currently the headset is off and I'm turning it around and nothing is happening. As soon as I place it on my head, detects that it's working as expected, and as soon as I put the controllers in my hand, the controllers wake up and you can see it can track my hands. Notice as well the black semicircle around my vision as I move. You'll also notice it's there when I turn. That's called a vignette. Kind of like a thing around the edge of your vision or the edge of the map. It looks terrible in the editor, but it's much less offensive in the headset. It's designed to help avoid motion sickness because the edges of your vision, your peripheral vision, is much more sensitive to motion than anything else. But you can see, you can move, you can turn with the right thumbstick, you can move with the left thumbstick. You can obviously move the controllers and that will pick up your rotation, and as you turn your head, it will do what you expected it would do. If, however, you are not on a headset, what you can instead use is the simulator. So if I go into Edit and Project Settings, is it Project Settings? It is Project Settings. So if you go into Edit and Project Settings, at the very bottom you should see XR Plugin Management, and then choose from the bottom XR Interaction Toolkit. In here there's a button where you can use the XR device simulator in scenes. There's a button that you tick for that, and then you can close that down. That means that if you are not using a headset on a given day, or you're working at home and you don't have access to a headset, you can simulate it. You get a nice little bit of UI down here telling you how to use it, because it is a bit uncomfortable and clunky. But by default it's set to control the HMD, the head mounted display. So all of the inputs from our controller is adjusting the head position, looking up, looking down, looking left, looking right. And if I use WAS and D, I can move around as if it were our first person controller. But let's say you want to move one of the controllers. You can either look over here where you've got the controller, and it says the toggle is T and Y to toggle between left and right controller. So if I press T, all of my controls now modify the left controller, and Y modifies the right controller. If I scroll in or out with the middle mouse, you'll see that will bring the currently active controller further away or closer to me. And if I just roll the controller, so if I scroll in and out, that's the behaviour you get. If you press middle mouse and scroll, that's the behaviour that you get. This will still be very useful, and you can see down here what the buttons are simulating. Left mouse is the equivalent of pressing trigger. G is the equivalent of pressing the grip button and grabbing, and then you've got the other buttons as well. So if I toggled to T, you can now see that I've got the same options over there. So you've got all sorts of different options, and then if I press U again, that will toggle back to the head-mounted display, allowing me to move around. Really important that if you're really frustrated and you're putting the headset on and nothing is working, is probably because you still need to go to Edit and Project Settings and then turn off that simulator if you've actually got a headset. So make sure you're adjusting that setting as appropriate. Making something grabbable in VR is so very, very easy. I'm going to keep this tutorial quite short, but I'm just going to introduce this first core concept. If I wanted a cube to be grabbable, I'm going to position that on the table, scale it down to be a much more appropriate size, and to make an object grabbable, it can be something as simple as a cube or something way more complicated that you downloaded from the asset store or made yourself. But if I add a component, what I'm looking for is an XR grab interactable, which is here. That adds the grab interactable, but it also adds the rigid body component, which is necessary to apply physics. If I press play, the simulator shouldn't be running, and you'll now see as the controllers come out of their sleep, I can walk over to the object and physically grab it, or I can grab it from distance. One thing I really want to point out though, if you grab it with a hand, as in physically grab it by touching it, you can still use that thumbstick. So notice there I'm grabbing and I'm rotating. If however you grab it from distance, you'll notice that I'm using the right thumbstick there and I'm not turning. If I do the same for the left hand and grab it from distance and try and move, I can't, and that can be a very frustrating thing. However, if I then grab it with the other hand, it's now grabbed normally and I can go back to using these features. I don't know if that's a bug or a feature. I don't like that behaviour. If anyone figures out how to solve it, please do let me know. It's been doing me brain in for about a year and a half. So you can see how easy that is to make something grabbable, and in future tutorials I'll show how you can be really, really advanced and powerful, including things like two-hand grab, changing the grab point on an object, making it so it's more physically accurate, and the settings and the options that are available to you. But one thing I did want to point out is the way the physics engine works by default. When you grab any object, you can poke it through any of the physics object, like so. And when you let go, you'll either poke up to the top if it was more than halfway through, or if it's more than halfway through down the bottom, it'll poke down the bottom. This can be an issue if you have, let's say this is a wall, which is here, and you poke it through the wall and you let go. You can imagine that being frustrating if you've got a key item in your game, the player pokes something through the wall and lets go, and it's gone forever and you can no longer grab it. It's also worth pointing out that your hands can go through surfaces. So if you wanted it to be, maybe you've got a mystery or you've got an obstacle on the other side of a wall, by default you can just poke your hand through the wall. So you've got to be careful of that as a potential exploit for your players. It's really important when you're designing your levels. So there's a couple of things we're going to go through in the next couple of tutorials, but the one thing I wanted to show you here is that the provided samples under the scenes, the sample scenes, are not the only things that are in here. In the samples folder, as you click through, you've also got the starter assets, which includes the demo scene. This has been provided by Unity. This is absolutely not me. I'm taking no credit for this one at all. But if I press play, it shows you a lot of the core functionality and features that you can utilise, and it shows you how easy they are to activate. I've got examples over there for different type of dynamic grabs. So if I use the right thumbstick, if I poke up with the thumbstick, the teleport area suddenly becomes available, and I can teleport to any of those teleport points, and if I let go of the right thumbstick, it will teleport me to there, point the direction I was going. Different examples of movement tracking, so you see that type of movement tracking stops it poking through. Instantaneous was the type we were using earlier. And then you've got kinematic, which is somewhat advantageous and can affect different objects. You've got different types of button interaction. You've got different ways of assessing whether you're looking at something or pointing at it, and examples for how you can interact with the user interface, depending on what it is that you're making. Toggle buttons and scroll buttons and stuff. However, this has only just been rolled out in this version of the toolkit, which is grabbing and climbing. So you'll notice that you've got, as you move towards it, it will change colour to highlight the areas that are grabbable. So there's a nice ladder there that you can use within your games, as well as other areas that you can climb up, and you can make anything climb up within your game. One final thing I wanted to demonstrate, if I go back to the scenes and the sample scene. There are also included these XRI examples and the UI 3D examples. These are very, very powerful tools. If I click on the prefabs folder, you can see that there is a dial within the scene, there is a joystick, there is a lever, there is a wheel, there is a slider, and a number of other things as well. What these allow you to do is, as you use each of these interactables, which is what they're called, interactable objects, you can say, when they reach a certain threshold, what should they do? Should this change the illumination of a light, for example? Should this change the position of something? So again, quick demo for how these work, and these come right out of the box. Again, I take no credit whatsoever for these. You have a joystick with 2 degrees of freedom, a lever with 1 degree of freedom, all sorts of different options that you may find you want to utilise within your game. Never quite understood how to use this one, but you get the idea, it's there. So, as a quick demo, how powerful these are, you can hook into them, and you can hook into them without using any code whatsoever. So I've got a slider here. I'm just going to make a random light, which is a point light, and I'm just going to put that in the middle of the scene, and I'm going to put it over here somewhere. Yeah. It's a light. You can clearly see that it's providing illumination. I'm going to turn shadows on while we're here as well. I'm going to change its lighting to be a dark red, and well, no, I'm going to change its intensity to something ridiculous. Oh, actually no, let's make it really obvious. If I go and put it over here, you can clearly see that there is now a red light near the cube. There we go, you can see there's a red light. What I'm going to tell this slider to do is add an event. If you've been keeping up to the tutorials and you've seen how we've done buttons and clicks, this is exactly the same. We're going to add an event, and we're going to tell this point light to be affected by this slider. So I'm going to change the function to affect the light. The light has a bunch of properties, but the one I want to change at the top is intensity. The intensity of the light is now matching the value of this slider. So if I press play and wiggle the slider, hopefully the light should go up and down. You'll notice that hopefully, if I've done this right, there was no code involved. There you go. Light on, light off, light on, light off. No code at all needed whatsoever. All good? Hopefully that's been useful for you, everybody. And if you've got any questions, do feel free to ask. And good luck making your VR games.